Welcome to my world once more. Today is another topic, and this time around we shall be talking on that storehouse of knowledge. Knowledge is power, but where do we really store this knowledge we acquire? Where is it coordinated? You acquire all this knowledge, where it is it really used to coordinate everything that the human being does? It is the brain. The brain is like the central processing unit that mankind made for the computers. You even hear cars these days, they say the brain box, which coordinates all the functions, and if there's any problem, they put the computer to really find the error code. The human body, the human brain is perfect in itself. Once it's not tampered with, it's okay. But when it is tampered with by bacteria, viruses, fungi, the bacterial problem of the brain is called bacterial meningitis, and the viral, fungal, and other pathogens problem of the brain is called aseptic meningitis. Also, the head injuries that could happen. We may even have the commonest one, where the brain itself does not control us again. That is our habits. Our habits now controls the brain. It is not the brain now giving us signals of when to eat, when to do certain things. We now form the habit of even voraciously eating and what have you. But that is not the concern of the topic today. My major concern today is how we can talk on meningitis and its complication. Bacterial meningitis is a very common problem in children because they are just newly exposed, and it may result in death. It's a severe problem within hours. The aseptic meningitis could stay long, and it has the consequences, the complications that in future will really show itself. Now it has been found that some could come out as dementia, Alzheimer's, and other form of these diseases that affect the brain, the Parkinson's disease. We know that bacterial complications could include epilepsy. So these are things that ordinarily you want to ascribe to being attacked by spiritual forces or whatever. But when you listen through, you'll be able to understand more from the slide section, which I shall present, to really tell us the complications and how to prevent it, how it is discovered, the modern, the things we are doing to make the thing less. WHO is really seriously involved in solving this problem of meningitis and reducing the complication of meningitis. So sit down and watch the slide section. You're welcome. Now let's look at the protective membrane called meninges. You can find after the skull, these membranes are three layers: the dura mater, the arachnoid matter, and the subarachnoid is that space where the CSF is. Then the third matter is the pia mater before you have the brain. The brain, both the brain and the spinal cord are surrounded by three membranes called the meninges. I've just exposed there. The function of the meninges is to protect the brain and spinal cord from mechanical trauma. That's one. To support the blood vessels, two, and to form a continuous cavity through which the CSF passes. That is the space, that network sort of. That's where the CSF. That the meningitis have defined as both aseptic and bacterial. All the other from agents such as fungi, medications, cancer, metastasis are all regarded as aseptic. Meningitis is the inflammation of the meninges, the membrane that surrounds the brain. According to WHO, epidemic of meningitis are very common in sub-Saharan Africa. Many organisms can cause meningitis, like I stated, bacteria, fungi. and so on and so forth. Bacterial meningitis is of particular concern because of the severe complications that you get from it. In the United States, viral meningitis is the most common, while bacterial meningitis is most serious. Most cases of both viral and bacterial have their complications. Causes: meningitis may be caused by physical injury. That is when you have the end injury, a reaction to certain chemicals. Neisseria, these are all bacteria species: meningococcus, the streptococcus, the haemophilus, the mycobacterium, the salmonella, listeria, staphylococcus. Viruses are then listed, then the fungi, and even the transmission is the route of transmission varies by organism. Most bacteria that cause meningitis, such as meningococcus, pneumococcus, and haemophilus influenza, are carried in the human nose and throat. They spread from the person to person by respiratory droplet or through secretion. Rubris streptococcus is often carried in the human gut or vagina and can spread from mother to child. So it's a very common problem for children. Meningitis, we are well protected, no problem. Signs and symptoms include severe headache, stiff neck, high fever, avoid bright light, drowsiness, convulsion, rashes, joint pain, cold, vomiting. The diagnosis is very important. The bacteria can sometimes be seen in microscopic examination of the spinal fluid after the lumbar puncture. By growing the bacteria from specimen of CSF or blood by rapid diagnostic test or by PCR, we call it polymerase chain reaction. The test is now put through the susceptibility testing to know the antibiotics, and then you can also do genomics study to identify. Routine contrast: the brain MRI is the most sensitive modality for diagnosis of bacterial meningitis because it helps detect the presence and extent of inflammatory changes in the meninges. The microscopic culture and sensitivity. This is where you think of how the sample is collected by lumbar puncture at the back. You look at the space, and then the CSF is analyzed in the lab. You look for bacteria. These are the studies you can do: the chemistry and serology, the culture and sensitivity, and the metallurgical study, where you really want to know the type of cells and the count. These are what we call the hemocytometer. They use it to count the number of WBC. If the presentation, you have mainly WBC, but the type of WBCs are these neutrophils. You really consider it as bacterial meningitis, and the glucose decrease, the protein that level, and the pressure is increased. For cerebral hemorrhage, that is injury, you mainly see red blood cells in the CSF, and the glucose is normal, others are normal. You can always understand why the glucose is decreased in bacteria, because the bacteria will use up the glucose, so you cannot expect the glucose in that sample to be the same. The culture is done. The PCR, very useful for the identification of the virus, the fungi, and any other pathogen. The cancer is also by biopsy. This is a culture plate showing strep pneumococcus. The complication: this is the area of concern mainly because the complication is really what comes up after if you leave. The hearing loss, the epilepsy is a recurrent seizure. It's a common thing that people those days would think probably it's a spiritual attack, but it's the brain itself that is now showing this problem. You can see all these are all brain problem: coordination, movement, and learning difficulties, and behavioral problem. Vision loss, these are still brain problem. Loss of limb, amputation is sometimes necessary to stop the infection spreading through the body and remove damage bone and joint problems such as arthritis, kidney problems. Clinical studies have shown negation of meningitis causing dementia. That is where that is the complication is becoming interesting. Alzheimer and Parkinson's disease, neurodegenerative diseases. That complication is interesting, and this is with the latest finding. The research from Oxford Institute of Population Aging has they discovered that common viruses appear to play a role in some cases of Alzheimer. Alzheimer is a problem these days. The causes of most cases of Alzheimer are currently unknown, but there is growing evidence to suggest microbial organisms are involved, in particular herpes simplex virus type 1, the so-called cold sore virus that you see around the lips of people after they must have overcome the little attack of malaria or what have you. The treatment is sensitivity to show the antibiogram, virucidal agents, and you can also talk of cancer therapy. WHO response. It set a path to achieve goals through concerted action across 5 intercontinental pillars. 1. Prevention and epidemic control, focus on development of new affordable vaccines so that this problem may never be experienced by especially children. 2. Diagnosis and treatment, focus on speedy confirmation of meningitis and optimal care. When you treat it quickly, you will not get the complication. Disease surveillance to guide meningitis prevention and control, part of it to prevent, carry and support those affected by meningitis, focusing on early recognition and improve access to care and support for complications from meningitis. And the fifth response is advocacy and engagement to ensure high awareness of meningitis, to promote, that's what we are doing right now, the awareness of meningitis, to promote country engagement and to affirm this.